welcome the people who have not. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. There's a few more people that are still coming. Part of the people from Ireland that are still coming are not here, and part of the people from the States are not here yet. So we're trying to wait a little bit to make sure everybody's in the room. I think there's up to like 30 people coming from the States, and they're somewhere on transit, and there are some people still left coming from the Ireland group. One of the things that I'd like to point out is I was made aware today that at 6:30 the restaurant on premises closes. Now we had dinner break scheduled for 6:30 to 7 to 8 o'clock. That means everybody's going to have to scatter and go running to try to find places to eat that are not on premises. What I think we'll do to make it easier for the people who would like to stay to have dinner, we'll simply break about 5. The program it's a very ancient program of core template healing. Now, this program has not been available on the planet for a very long time because there are frequencies of energy that were not available on the planet for a very long time, until January 1st, 2000. This program was given to us in February of 2000 in order that we begin to learn or relearn how to use these special frequencies that are now available. What we're going to do before I get into, because once I get on the roll, I don't stop talking, which is, good when you learn things, but it can be distracting if we have other things to do. We have manuals for this course. They come with this program. There's a lot of people from the States who already have your manuals, but you will get another one with this program because it's part of the program to be entitled to one. There are 211 pages of the Kathara manual. It's very intensive. The information in the Kathara manual we will move through in the time we're together over the next couple of days. And we'll move through it at a rate where you will learn what's most important. By the end of that time, you would know what it means to be able to be a Kathara healing facilitator, and you would know how to do the procedures. But there's a lot of detail that's in the manual. That's why you're getting the manual. It would take me 3 weeks to cover a lot of the detail that's in the manual. So you will have the summarization of that information in a practical way, where you'll be able to use the information when you leave here. You will know enough of how to run the practice. You will be able to do a practice session with Kathara healing if you want to. But if you want to learn more, there is the manual. And we are selling the manual in the States now, aside from the workshops, which is new. So there are people that are going into it without even attempting to take the workshop. It's better to take the workshop because we will be getting some hands-on experience with the energy work we're doing, and it gets you will learn more quickly. The feeling of running the energies involved. So this is an energy healing program. When we talk about energy healing, it's not in what I sometimes refer to as a fluffy-headed way, which means not real intellectual. It's like, there's energy in the universe, and we throw that around. That's fine if you're going to be an entry-level healing facilitator in any form. There's people that do Reiki. There's a lot of other healing systems out there. When we talk about energy, we're going to show you what energy we're talking about. We're going to explain to you the structure of energy that you're using. This is based on a 15-dimensional system. You will find out what a dimension is. You will find out what currents run in that 15-dimensional system and how they run through the body. You learn something about what's called triadic phase currents, which is if you are going to be a true and genuine energy healer, and not just somebody who says, I have energy and I'm going to heal with it, where you're going to be like an energy doctor, where you will know what currents to run for what conditions. You will know the difference between currents. These are some of the things that you will learn in the Kathara healing program that are very different from any of the other healing programs out there. Most healing programs do not explain to you, first of all, what your anatomy is, your subtle energy anatomy. You have a 15-dimensional anatomy. And if you don't know what its parts are, you're not going to know how to run energy through those parts in order to get the best effect. So you'll learn about your 15-dimensional anatomy. You'll learn about the dimensional structure. And that's what we'll cover first, the context of healing. If we're going to use energy healing as a means to improve our life and the lives of others, it's very, very useful to understand what you're using. If you're an artist and you're going to make a painting, you don't know the names of colors, and you don't know anything about mixing the colors, you're not going to get mastery of the results that you would like if you had studied how to mix paints. So this is learning how to mix energy, learning what the structure is, learning where energy comes from, which takes us into bigger issues. It takes us into more cosmic issues of where does energy come from? Where does our consciousness come from? Is there a structure, or what's called a primal order, to the way energy and consciousness are structured in manifest form? So these are some of the things. And before we get into the particulars of teaching you how to run energy in your body, first we'd like you to know what energy you're running, where it comes from. What is this energy people talk about? What is the energy that makes your body work, that you're walking around in right now? Where does your consciousness come from? When you learn about the context of healing, you learn 15-dimensional structure. You learn about dimensional frequency bands, or wave bands, that allow the structure of manifest form to take place. So this program is very different than many other programs because of this. Because we will teach you the context of healing, not just the elements of healing and the methods of healing, but the context that is taking place within. So when you decide, I'm going to draw energy from where, you're going to have an idea of where you're drawing it from. It's a master's course. It's not, there's a lot of good energy courses out there that teach you the outer levels of the auric field, that teach you how to run some basic symbols. They usually don't teach you why you're running symbols, though. What is a symbol? What's a picture? Why am I projecting a picture of energy into somebody else's body? And then you see the healing systems, like Reiki, that use symbols. They explain a lot about how to use that symbol, but they don't teach you a lot about why you're using a symbol in the first place. When you begin to understand dimensional structure, you begin to understand things about symbols, the mathematical programs. You'll begin to understand what's really taking place with these different healing modalities. So today, when we're going to first pass out the course manuals, so you have a chance to look at those, and they're also very helpful. When I put transparencies up on the board, everything that will go up on the board, you do have in your book. The books are, I'll tell you about the books in a minute. Can we get them passed out first? Anybody will help me do this? Okay, thank you, Lauren. Okay, once we get the books passed out, I'll get you a little bit familiarized with these books. So you see what's in there. There's actually two things contained in this manual. One is the pagination set of 211 pages. That's your text. That has a lot of heavy text. Interwoven with this, you will find another set of pages that are paginated. They have two sets of pages, one at top, one at bottom. These will be the ones that appear up on the board. That will be, if you choose to be a teacher, an instructor of Kathara. The second set of pages will tell you what pages to take out of your manual to make transparencies of, to put up, so you have your program. So if you want to teach it, you have it sequenced already. So this manual contains both of those things. Now, let's see, if we, and I believe, excuse me, Graham, did we get the contents page put in them?
Yeah, Michael's just going to put the holes in the punch holes. So later on today, we'll have the new index and the shorts, the hurry.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah. Now, in the original manuals that have been around since February of 2000, because the workload that we have been under bringing through a whole bunch of different programs, not just Kathara, we hadn't even had a full index put in here, or a table of contents, where you just like kind of hit or miss, go ahead and find your pages to the 211. It was very difficult to locate things. We have the new table of contents page. So this will be coming, they're getting holes punched in them now, and they're going to bring them back today. So you'll get these to put in the front of your binders, so it'll be very easy to find the different elements of what's contained in your manual. Now, let's see. Okay. If you look on page 1 in your manuals, that's right after the opening cover page. It says Introduction to Kathara Biogenesis Technologies. Now, there's a word that most people have never heard before, bioregenesis. What does that mean? Well, bio comes from biology, and regenesis comes from the concept of regeneration, or bringing back to its original creation, regenesis. Bioregenesis is a word that's used to describe certain technologies that go back into the core template that your body matter manifests on. And going into that template, bringing it back to its original order. Some people refer to that original order as the divine blueprint. We all have one, but that's a term that's not going to mean much to you until we start to understand what our anatomy is. A divine blueprint is not just something that God made us have that is our perfect form. That's one way people might like to look at it in a simple way. But if you want to understand what that means and make it real, you need to understand that we're dealing with something called scalar wave technology. Our bodies are built on scalar waves. Scalar waves, that's another word that science throws around a lot, but there's no real good definition for it. If you look in the dictionary, the word scalar is like you have to chase it around and find out what are they talking about when our scientists talk about scalar. When we use the word scalar, it's used in very specific terms. It's used to refer to a fixed, standing, columnar wave of energy that flashes on and off between light and sound. It goes from being sound in its vibration stage, flashes on to become light in its oscillation stage. In the program that's being taught here, there are some differences that are still being argued about in quantum physics, where right now it's common in traditional science to use the word vibration and oscillations to basically mean the same thing. They do not mean the same thing. In fact, they're diametrically opposed to each other. Vibration is the process of holding energy in. Oscillation is the process of energy expenditure. They're contraction and expansion of energy. And when we're getting into energy healing, it's important to understand these differences. I know in the New Age movement, there's a lot of things, a lot of people are, we have to raise our frequency, we have to raise our vibration. They don't realize those two statements put together are contradicting each other. To raise frequency, you need to lower vibration and raise oscillation. So there's a lot of things that if you don't understand the core template structure, what is this context of healing? What is dimensional structure? If you don't understand that structure, you're not going to know the difference. Why it's not accurate to say, I'm going to raise my frequency and raise my vibration. All right? With a course like this, it gives you a level of empowerment that's different from simply teaching you how to pick up a paintbrush and make a painting. It teaches you enough theory where you can make intelligent decisions, not just see what comes out when you're making the painting. The painting in this case is called a healing application. There's also a lot of things that aren't spoken about in the Kathara manual itself that by learning these things are implied. Kathara healing means light, sound, and one. Ka, light. Tha, sound. Ra, one. That's where that word comes from. It's an ancient word that refers to the light and sound and the wholeness of anything in creation. The manifestation templates of creation. When we get into that, it's a pretty lofty concept. It's taking us into a domain that's not simply about our body and our energy and how it works in our body. It's taking us into the universal structure, into cosmic order, which inevitably takes us into a question of what, who, what, where is God? What is our relationship to God? Is there a God? Because right now in our societies, you pick 5 people and they get 5 different answers to the question of whether there is a God or whether there isn't, and who it is and what it wants from you. All right? There's no real understanding anymore of our personal relationship to that. Obviously there somewhere, but who knows what it is, thing, being, called source. When we get into Kathara healing, we will face the realities of science, dimensional structure, the natural laws of energy that allow creation to take place. But they will inevitably take us to a point of asking who does that creation in the first place. So it's a paradigm of understanding healing and understanding yourself in a way that's much larger than a lot of the things you'll find out there in other healing systems. We're not afraid to tackle the concept of is there a God, what is God, and what does it have to do with Kathara healing. We need to understand, first of all, if we're drawing energy currents, that those currents are directly part of that. See, I explain. I use the word being, I use the word concept sometimes as far as describing God. I don't say he, because we don't teach you that it's a man in the sky with a white beard waiting for you to cross over. There is a presence, and whatever your religious beliefs are, that's okay. They're honored and respected, by Azurite Temple and paragraphs we teach. But we do try to explain one thing. There is consciousness, and consciousness is intelligent. There was consciousness before there was form. Form actually manifests within consciousness. When you take all of the form and all of the consciousness and the entire cosmos, you have what a lot of people call God. And it is intelligent. It is an energy and it is an identity. But it's much broader than the small concepts of a he-God or a she-God that you might get taught in regular religious belief systems. Once upon a time, and this isn't a fairy tale, once upon a time, in our societies, in parts of our history, that were part of this planet's history, there were civilizations of humans that knew amazing things. We would consider them amazing from our perspective here. They had an understanding of their place in the universe. They had an understanding of what's called divine science, which are the natural laws of energy and consciousness that allow manifestation of physical reality and form to take place. They understood these things and they used them as common knowledge. These civilizations, we ask ourselves, well, we're told that we evolved out of apes. They're still fighting. Our scientists to their communities are fighting about where did we come from? Were we, related to apes or chimpanzees? It's actually chimpanzees we seem to have a little genetic similarity to. But it's all guesswork. They find a few, sets of bones buried, and they do DNA testing, and they seem to have something to do with what our genome is. And there's a big leap in assumption made right there that means we must have come out of primate evolution. We didn't. This is one of the things science is going to discover, probably despite itself, maybe in the next 50 years. When we enter Kathara healing, it's important to remember that if we look at ourselves as, well, we evolved from being apes, we were animal forms, when we look at ourselves in this concept, we are denying a huge potential, a potential that our race is and was, if we realize there were humans on this planet long before the historical records show that they were advanced. And actually the fact that this Kathara healing program exists is testimony to that fact, that they exist, because they still exist, because they're the ones that brought this material here. And it wasn't channeled. It was brought through physical contact. All right? I want you to know that up front. The people that I talk about, the ancient ones that were humans, that they were quite tall, actually, they're about 12 feet tall, because their genomes were more fully activated than ours are. They had 144 chromosomes activated. Right now we have 46, our scientists tell us. These beings, these people, were our ancient relatives. But you will learn, as you go into the Kathara healing more fully, you will learn about something called time, and you will learn that time is simultaneous. Quantum physics is just beginning to play with this concept. We're doing more than playing with it. We're treating it as a simple law of the way reality is, because time is simultaneous. What does that mean? And what does it mean in relation to ancient races? And what does it mean in relation to healing? It's a key element in understanding those things. If time is simultaneous, and it's laid out more like space, if you imagine that you could have a map of time, just like you could have a map of the world, and say, oh, that's this place, and that's this place. Oh, that's this time, and that's this time. And just like there's ways to move between space, the same thing applies to time. What we're going to learn, in Kathara healing, as we move into it, and this is some of the things that we don't get too heavily into above board, but there will be more of it in the small print. Reading this in your manual, we will discover that those ancient races are parts of who we are today. We will discover a process of how people come into being in the first place. In simultaneous time, there is a self that comes into incarnation, and it breaks itself down into a set number, 1,728 cells, that go into 1,728 different time vectors. This is where the concept of reincarnation came from. But reincarnation, the way it's taught in contemporary society, and the way it was taught by the ancients, is no longer accurate. Because it's telling you that you're trapped in a cycle of, okay, you're alive in this life, then you die, and if you weren't good, you have to, you come back in a miserable position in the next cycle. It does not work that way at all. This is one of the things that the biblical teachings once contained, the true teachings of the Christos. Now, the word Christos is used to refer to the D12 frequency band. It's a frequency band composed of pre-matter, which would look like liquid light. It's called hydroplasm. The ancient teachings of the ancient races, who knew all these things on a conscious level, they talked about the Christos, but not just in relation to a story of a man who supposedly died on the cross. The Christos, in that word, existed long before the Christ story that we know of. But in the Christ story that came out through our Bible teachings, there was a lot that was edited. The Christ story originally taught us all about simultaneous time. And it said, no, reincarnation isn't exactly the way it is. It isn't that you reincarnate first here, then there. That may be your experience if you don't become what's called Christed in this lifetime. If you become Christed, you simply become aware of your other selves, and you start to integrate them. And it changes the DNA, and it changes the body in a way that you're able to create a physical condition called atomic transmutation. In spiritual terms, that's called ascension. All of these words that come from our ancient teachings, our spiritual teachings, it seems like we have spiritual over here and science over here, and they do not agree with each other. As far as creation, as far as the way anything works, spirituality and science, the way they're taught in our cultures, oppose each other. That is not how reality is structured. And if we can start to realize the real structure, where those two elements fit together perfectly, we become empowered. We're no longer stuck in a polarity drama and conflict. These are some of the things that by working with Kathara, we begin to learn. A larger framework that unifies both of the smaller ones that tend to keep us stuck in polarity. The information, I'll share with you where this information originally came from. The erasers I talked about of the ancient times, which means they're in time vectors of Earth's evolution that will be considered past compared to this one, but they're in another space compared to this one. They have also evolved in a reality system that's called Inner Earth. Now, when we get into the next workshop, and I think most of you are taking that. Are most of you taking the roundtable workshop as well? Is there anybody that's not? Okay, not doing the roundtable soon? Okay. Because in the roundtable one, I will show you what I mean when I say Inner Earth. All right? I'll show you maps as far as what that means in relation to this world. It's not a place you will find by digging. All right? But it is a reality field. It's just as physical and just as real as here. This program emerged from contact with beings from the inner earth. They're humans. They're humans that evolved from the ancient races that had to go subterranean because of certain conditions that were taking place on the planet. What's one of the amazing rude awakenings for most people is, you mean we're not alone here? We just look out that we're alone on this planet. We're the superior race on this planet. And it's a real relief to find out we're not. Because there's so much we don't know. We're connected to races that exist in what's called inner earth, and we're connected to the races of the ancients because of the simultaneous time reality. We are able to interact with them. You could see one of them physically. They could come to visit you, and you could go to visit them if you knew how to master your DNA. Because your DNA is your key to controlling something. I'm throwing a lot out at you it's almost like baiting your intellect. We'll plug these in as we go along. But by working with your DNA, you learn to control something called angular rotation of particle spin. Angular rotation of particle spin is the axis that the particles in your body rotate on. And this is what separates reality fields. We're in a matter system that has a specific angular rotation of particle spin. That means particles and atoms and molecules rotate on a similar axis. There are other systems that have a different axis. In simultaneous time, it's also simultaneous space, which means all of this is taking place in one spot, all at the same time. It appears to be separate manifest reality fields because of the difference in angular rotation of particle spin. Now, in scientific terms, that takes us into a condition of the relationship between electrons and protons within the atomic structure. the relationships as they exist now create polarity, which allows the body to stay locked into its own time vector that is in right now. When you change the relationships, the electromagnetic relationships between electrons and protons. Now, protons are in the nucleus of the cell, and electrons orbit around it. And the electrons, I believe, are positively charged. No, they're negatively charged, and the protons are positive. Is that right? Anyway, when you change these relationships, you change the polarity between electrons and protons. This allows protons and electrons to bond with their antiparticles. Because when we get into learning about the context of healing and dimensional structure, we'll find every particle implies an antiparticle. That's just the nature of the structure. When you bond in the body, in the atomic structure, particle and antiparticle, certain chemical reactions take place within the body that allow temporary demanifestation of the physical form. That doesn't just go poof. What it does is the angular rotation of particle spin between the particle and the antiparticle merge, and they become the same angular rotation of particle spin, which temporarily takes the body matter into a state of hydroplasm, which is that D12, dimension 12, pre-matter liquid light that I mentioned before. When a person or a being has control over what the DNA is doing, not just control over your DNA, your genetic movement, you have the ability to choose what angular rotation of particle spin you're going to use today. That means you have the ability to move into other space-time vectors physically. Right now, we can't do this, and there's a very specific reason why we can't do this. Right now, our DNA is not functioning the way it was in the ancient times when our race was 12 feet tall, and we could do things like have conscious control over the gene code. There has been damage done to the human genome that was not intended. God didn't intend it, and neither did humans. It was a misfortune of political history. Now, we won't get into the political history in this class, because this is a Kathara Healing class. We could go on for 6 weeks on history. We have a lot of the new history coming out soon in a new book. It's called the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation, but we won't get into that right now. When we start to use Kathara, now I'm going to take it, I just kind of brought you out into a space of, wow, all this weird stuff I'm talking about. I like to talk to you about the weird stuff, because first of all, it gets you out of you come into a workshop, well, okay, I think it's about healing, so that means this. I just gave you about 20 other things to add to the list of how does that fit into any of this. This is good, because it stimulates your mind to want to grow. To say, okay, well, I'm either going to have to say, this one was nuts, or maybe there's something to learn here. And most people are nice people and say, all right, let's check it out and see what there is to learn. I wanted to give you some of the information that's more than just about healing. Now, I don't do this with every class, with every group of people. It depends on how, when I walk into the room, how they feel. The feeling of the consciousness of the people when I walk into a room. Some groups cannot handle some of the information I just said to you. And I say it in a way that's just like matter of fact, because in my world it is. I have met these people and I have experience with a lot of help temporarily overriding certain distortions in the gene code. I have been able to go into those other reality fields I talk about. I'm not making things up. I'm not using channeled information to tell you about what might be able to happen. I speak to you things I know that I've experienced. Now, things I have full control over. I can't make a portal appear and shift my angular rotation of particles, spin and pop through. Not yet. But I know it's potentiality. Because with assistance, which means frequency assistance, I have been able to experience that on several occasions. And it's awesome. Your whole world changes when you realize you have these potentials as a human being. And you start to realize that, I'm not the descendant of an ape. I'm not the descendant of a chimpanzee. Whatever the descendant of. There's a whole world view that goes with understanding the simple things that start with Kathara healing. The simple things like dimensional structure, multidimensional structure. The simple things like, what is your anatomy, really? You learn in school and you can figure out as you go along that you have feet and hands and a body in between and a head. This anatomy you can see. This anatomy you become familiar with and you learn how to master. From the time you're an infant you grow, you progressively learn how to handle your body. But because we don't see right now the subtle anatomy levels to our body, there's a whole level of our anatomy, the largest part of it, that we don't learn how to do anything with. It goes on autopilot. It can be influenced by things that can harm it. It will, in turn, harm the body that we don't know about. So when we get into Kathara healing, we're going to go into the core. We're going to learn something about something called a Kathara grid, which is a light sound grid. That is the core template. It has 12 points on it. I'll get into the diagrams to show you this in a bit. But it's a core template of manifestation. When you're dealing with other healing modalities out there, we have allopathic medicine, which is, that's like, allopathic medicine can save lives when it's lucky, and a lot of times it can help, but at the same time it's causing other harm. It makes the body deteriorate faster. It fixed one thing, but it broke something else without realizing it. This is the limitation of allopathic medicine, because allopathic medicine looks at just the outside. It looks at the three-dimensional structure of the body. It looks at, yes, they can cut the body open, and they can use an electron microscope to go down and look at the subatomic particles that make up the body, but they still don't know where they came from. This goes into something called the template, a manifestation template, the Kathara grid. There are levels to this template, and it's a template built of scalar waves, light and sound patterns, fixed points of columnar waves of light and sound that have a synchronization of flash rhythm. They flash on and off, and when they flash on, they bring matter into manifestation. When they flash off, they take it out. It's an energy circulation system that takes consciousness in the form of frequency from non-manifestation into manifestation. We think that our consciousness is sitting in our brains, but in truth, every particle in our body is made out of a portion of our personal consciousness. And in the way our societies have taught us to look at ourselves and the world and things like that, we don't realize there's a whole part of ourselves we don't even know yet. We have consciousness in ourselves that holds information, that holds data. It's called cellular memory. The body healing takes you into these realities, and it builds from the core level up. You learn about the Kathara grid, the several levels of that grid. You learn how that fits in with the more known things like the chakra system, the energy vortices that come through and bring energy into the manifest form. There's a lot of information about chakras out there now. Even the Hindu systems had several dimensional chakras for thousands of years, but nobody ever told you where they came from or what they were connected to. You will learn these interconnections with Kathara healing. You will learn where the chakras connect with the DNA and where the templates connect with the DNA and what that has to do with things. You'll learn where the aura field levels are formed on that. And you'll learn what levels and stations of dimensional consciousness are contained within each level of the aura field and therefore correspond to each chakra and each DNA strand. There's a whole set of interrelationships that your body is run on all the time that you don't remember here. Once we come into a baby body here, called fetal integration, once we come in, we're a consciousness before that. And we come from somewhere, and we merge into a fetal body. When that happens, it's like turning on the lights on the consciousness, because the fetal body is so small that it cannot bring in 90% of the identity in the form of energy. So there's a part of you that you carry around with you all the time. This is where people get into talking about souls and things like that. There's a part of you that's always directly connected to Source that has huge amounts of knowledge available to you. A master within. You come in with one. Some people say everybody has a guardian angel. Well, you have yourself. The rest of you that you didn't bring into your body yet. Your consciousness, your knowing. The reason that we don't get that knowing back by the time we expand our bodies into becoming large grown-up bodies is because our DNA templates aren't working effectively. The human being was designed on a 12-strand DNA template. Now, I'm making a distinction between a DNA template and a chemical DNA. The template is a scalar array blueprint that allows for the chemical combinations of the identified DNA to manifest through. We were supposed to be 12-strand DNA beings. Now, science looks at the chemical DNA, and it calls it 2 strands, first of all. There's 2 heli, and they call that 2 strands. In the system we teach, that's not even 2 strands, that's 1 strand, because there are 12 double heli strands in the full DNA template of human. The DNA template of human has a very important purpose. It allows progressively each of 12 dimensions of frequency to progressively integrate into the body system so that level of consciousness can become awake here. And you can get the rest of it into your body. because of certain mutations that our genes carry right now, that gets cut off. There's a process that we'll explain here, I think probably in this evening's part we'll get to that, where there are certain ages where all this is supposed to take place by, normally, where we're supposed to have dimensions 4, 5, and 6 of our consciousness by this age, and then dimensions 7, 8, and 9 by this age. Now dimensions 4, 5, 6 of your consciousness are what we refer to as the soul body, the soul consciousness. 7, 8, and 9, dimensions 7, 8, and 9 are the oversoul consciousness. And then 10, 11, and 12 are the avatar consciousness, or the Christos consciousness. There is a very systematic divine order to how all of this works. Consciousness and biology, where progressively the body would expand and bring to you the rest of your consciousness so you could wake up in your body and come and finish what you came here to do. Because we all started out as consciousness. We all, in order to come into manifestation, had to emerge from some place, which we call the primal light and sound fields, and then slowly move down into manifestation through levels of matter density. Now the levels of matter density go directly with the dimensional scale that we're going to learn about first. I won't go too much more into that direction with you because I'll probably lose you unless I start showing. Some of you are familiar with the diagrams and things already, but those who aren't, I'm going to start putting the diagrams up on the board so we can go through the basics of Kathara healing. So you can find out about the context of healing, which means what are dimensions? What is the basic cosmic order that all this healing is taking place within? Once you learn this, then we'll learn the anatomy, the elements of healing. The Kathara manual is structured in a way where the chapters are broken down and cover that. In chapter 1, we have the context of healing. It's the structure of a unified field and a multidimensional anatomy and form in general. So before you can understand your form and what its parts are and how it comes to be, it helps to understand how form itself comes into being. All right? Let's see, chapter 1, yeah. So these are some of the things that we're going to cover in chapter 1. And I'm going to try to cover chapter 1 today. Between this afternoon, we'll break at 5 to 6:30 for dinner so people can go to the local dinner. They will come back from 6:30 probably until 10. We'll take a break in there so you're not overwhelmed. Like a small, short break. Now, in that period of time, I want to be able to move through the information that's contained in this book that deals with the holographic template. This is where we get into the concept that reality is actually a holographic projection. Now, holograms emerge by the certain interrelationships of light beams bouncing off each other, refracting through each other. It creates an image. We're going to start to learn about what we're all walking around in matter. There's a whole process of perception that's taking place subconsciously, where you become aware that the only form of anything that exists is pure energy. It's a unified field of energy. But we can experience what is a holographic projection of matter that is very solid when you're walking around in it because of dimensional structure. Dimensions are something that we will learn about. We'll learn the structure of dimensions because it is a very specific structure. When you look up the word dimension in a standard dictionary, at least in America, it's another one of those like scalar wave, very vague concept. It's used more as a quality to describe certain other things than as an ism all by itself, than as a noun. When we talk about dimensions, we're not using it as a word that explains certain attributes of another noun, like the dimension of consciousness. You can use it that way. But when we talk about structure of dimensions, we're talking about very specific ordered systems of energy that exist and that are part of the natural laws and function and structure of how the universe works. So it's used in a much more specific term than most people in the scientific communities we use dimension. It is a thing. It is a noun. It has specific characteristics to it. It's made of specific things, and it operates in certain ways. Once you understand this, when people talk about multidimensional energy, multidimensional healing, you have a bigger framework to understand what that means. You also have the ability to start saying, okay, dimensions are specific things. We're in something called a time matrix, which we'll see this diagram of, that allows for space-time experience to happen. And that time matrix has a primal order, or mathematical geometrical formula, upon which its energy particles are built. That creates a set of 15 dimensions. So there's infinite dimensions in the universe, but they run in sets of 15. And that is a standard natural law of physics that our scientists don't know yet here. We'll learn simply the 15-dimensional structure. And what's nice about the way we learn it, we don't have to go through 3 dictionaries where there's scientific jargon to get there. Because you can get heavily caught up in quantum mechanics and all those kind of things, and use the words that physicists use that are usually very, very long and sometimes created on purpose to confuse rather than to enlighten. There is a way to understand what seems to be hard stuff. And most people don't want to be physicists. I mean, they happen to be, have that, there's a certain intellectual spark that really gets into detail. If we want to be a physicist to know this. Most people couldn't be bothered. I just want to get through my day. I have a few things I'd like to do. And, I'd like to learn about healing, but I don't want to be a physicist. I don't have the time to invest in that. You don't have to become a physicist to use Kathara healing. But you will begin to understand basic structures of things that the physicists, if they stop arguing about it because we don't use the same words, they start to see that when we use this word, it means this in your language, which we're trying to begin to show the science community. They have a huge framework to apply all that sophisticated knowledge to. Meanwhile, you, as an individual person, whatever level of education you have or don't have, you still have the ability to understand the core structure of how manifestation occurs. This gives you the ability to learn empowerment. You can learn to have power over your physical body in a way that you can create healing within it. You can start to understand your connection to the universe and to Source, and you don't need a priest, a rabbi, a Buddhist person, anybody to do it for you. This is an independent course that teaches you that you have the power within you to understand these things. If you understand about dimensional structure, you will give yourself the gift of being able to know how to run frequency consciously, which means you will be able to choose what frequency when you're trying to heal something. If you don't know anything about frequency, you can run energy, you don't know what the heck you're running. What's happening in the New Age movement, unfortunately, a lot right now, is there's a lot of healing systems out there using energy, subtle energy. You can feel the energy when you start to play with those systems and build it. But they do not teach you anything about, okay, if we're in dimensions 1, 2, and 3 here, there's a 3-dimensional system. One might be in D4 or higher, or even if it exists. There are influences in some of the mid-dimensional structures that are very dangerous. And right now, people that are running healing energy that don't know how to seal their fields or clear their fields and keep them aligned are actually transmitting things that can be harmful to themselves and to other people because they don't know dimensional structure. And they don't know how to simply hold the integrity of their own biofield within that structure. So as you learn about the structure of dimensions, you will learn that there are parts of you need to kind of pay attention to, like basic hygiene, keep your dimensional anatomy free from being influenced by things that would be harmful forces, because they are there. Excuse me. We don't spend a lot of time in Kathara healing on those forces. In fact, most times in Kathara healing, if it wasn't a group that I felt you could deal with me throwing some of the more intensive stuff at you, most people don't even get the earlier information on where this came from. I don't talk about the ancient races until like level 2. But I felt that with you guys, I wanted to bring that out. I felt you could handle it, and your minds are open enough to want to explore what that might mean, rather than just reject the whole program because it says something that you believe couldn't be. Yeah. All right. So there's going to be some things interwoven into this teaching of Kathara 1 that wouldn't be in a real beginners level class with people coming in fully cold. And there's a few right here that I think are coming in fully cold, but there's a consciousness that you carry that you can be a quick study. You can pick up fast. That's all that's needed. People that are coming from real judgmental spaces, when you're in a judgmental space, you have a block that comes down, like a big black curtain. Comes down over your mind and over your heart. And somebody can explain something to you a million times, but as long as you hold that curtain there, none of the light's going to come through. When I deal with an audience that's coming from that space, which is a real, very tight space of focus, where they're very certain they know everything about the way the universe works, so nobody's going to tell me any different. There's a whole different approach to take to this. You're not like that, and I'm glad. That means we can all learn fast. And every time I go into a workshop like this, it's wonderful because we learn together. I have information that I share with you, and you share with me as well. There's a consciousness that each of you brings to this room, And there's a collective of consciousness that you are, as the collective of people in this room, that I learn from as well. So it's a mutual learning. I don't put myself up as a guru that, there was me, that kind of thing. No. I put myself up as a person who knows certain things because I've had rather unique experiences this lifetime. I have them on purpose. I have them because I have a soul contract. I have them, which means before I was born, I came in to play the role that I play now as a teacher. But this is not a program where you're going to be taught to put your power anywhere else but in your own hands. You're not going to be taught to follow the guru. You're not going to be taught to surrender your mind or your pocketbooks or anyone else to some authority figure outside yourself. You're going to be taught to find it within you. And if I can do that, help you to get there with it, we can start to, there's a growth spurt that comes with integrating this level of material. All of a sudden, you rediscover part of yourself that you forgot. I have the Kathara, I have this anatomy that I can use now. There's an excitement about the growth that if you will let the belief systems that you come in with grow and expand with it, you can go to amazing places. I've been very grateful for the information that has been given to us with the Kathara manual and several other programs. It's been challenging some because it's so different from what you're taught in school, from what you're taught in church. You just don't get Kathara healing in these places. And it gives a paradigm that's very self-coherent. It explains itself within itself. It's not contradictory in any way, no matter how detailed it gets. All those details in Kathara healing are very coherent with each other. But what it does is challenge all belief systems. It challenges the limitations of science, the paradigms that are out there now, and it challenges some limitations of religion and spirituality that are out there. That's why it can be a little unnerving for some people when they first encounter some of the things I talk about freely. I'm not here to challenge you. I'm here to simply share with you. I want you to know that. So if there's things in this program, like when we get into talking about the structure of dimensions and the inevitable connection that has to consciousness and what that might mean in relation to source, I want you to know I'm not challenging any beliefs that you already hold. I come in with a huge amount of respect for wherever you are, and I'm not trying to convince you or change you from being wherever that is. Just realize that there's a let's grow together feeling about this rather than me imposing belief system on you, because I won't do that to you. That's not the way to teach anybody anything anyway. Now, when we get into the structure of dimensions, particle phasing, here's where it gets scientific. Particle. We talk about the units, the primal units, the substance, out of which all the other things are created. Okay, we have a template. It's made of scalar waves. Well, what are scalar waves made of? And you always trace it back to something it's made out of, right? If it's a thing that can be identified as a quantitative form, is a scalar wave. Okay, that means it's made of something, right? You're going to learn what the primal units, the building blocks of matter are. And there are three things. They're called part chi, part k, and part chi. Now, interestingly, quantum physics has already discovered and uses the word particle for certain subatomic, submicroatomic particles. They don't know what they are or what they do, but they've been identified because I had some physicists from the United States chasing me around trying to see what else they knew. And they were attached to some things I didn't want to get involved with, so I disappeared and didn't further that conversation. But some of this is already, or just beginning, to be verified by what we consider contemporary official science. Now, particle phasing has to do with these three basic units of energy. Particle represents the state of antimatter, A-N-T-E, not anti, but A-N-T-E matter. Now, antimatter is the first waveform that consciousness takes when it makes the first step, first transition into an expressible external form of energy. You have particle units, which are, you can fit billions of them on a head of a pin. These are the things that compose larger scalar waves. There's a whole process, a whole building block system of energy patterns in the form of light and sound that build up to form the next stage that become manifest matter. So you learn about part chi, part k, and part cum. Part k are the units of consciousness that form antiparticles, and part cum are the units of consciousness that form particles. This forms a threefold universal structure when you take it into the macrocosm. It forms a particle universe. It forms its counterpart, antiparticle, part k universe. And it forms one right in the middle. It's called the antimatter, particle universe. There's a whole interaction of energy that constantly takes place within the structure of dimensions. And later, when we get into some of the more advanced forms of Kathara healing, in fact, there's a little bit added to these manuals this time. You're going to get the intro to Kathara 2 at the end of this manual, which will get into something called Merkaba mechanics, Merkaba fields, counter-rotating spirals of electromagnetic energy, interdimensional electromagnetic energy. When we learn basic structure, it's going to take us up to the point where we start to understand the advanced levels of the energy systems in our body that get into Merkaba. And anybody that's heard that word before will have heard it in a context of ascension. And that is a spiritual context, but actually it's a very scientific process of being able to pass your body through interdimensional portals to, if you want to, demanifest yourself and return to your full expansion and oneness with Source. So this information that may be a little too scientific for some people and not spiritual enough for some, you'll find that this will lead you to spirit. But at the same program, the programs that we teach that teach you about your soul and your oversoul and your avatar and your rishi level of identity, they will lead you back to science. So it doesn't matter which end you start at. Okay, but more people come together. Okay. So we'll learn a bit about particle phasing. Now the phasing is that flashing on and off, those scalar waves I talked about earlier. That's called phasing. If you have a standing columnar little minute scalar wave that's composed of part of K, or particle units, and it flashes on and off, that's called phasing. When it flashes on, it's bringing particles into matter. When it flashes off, it's taking them back out of matter. What's really happening, what is fascinating, when you start to get your higher sensory perception turned on, you can prove this for yourself. We are all flashing on and off in and out of manifestation constantly. We actually appear and disappear constantly. It happens so fast, certain parts of it so fast, and other parts so slow, in this very synchronized balance, that we get consistency of form as if we're here the whole time. We actually disappear in between moments. And this is because of particle phasing, those little scalar waves that our body templates, that our matter base is built up. They have different rhythms of flashing on and off, of phasing rhythms. There's 3 dimensions worth of particle units that make up this part of the body that we see. And they have very specific ratios of particle phasing or flashing on and off rhythms compared to each other. This creates the very physically feeling illusion hologram that we call matter, that we walk around in. So we learn about this particle phasing and its relationship to matter density. We learn that there are stages of matter density in the structure of universal structure. If we have a 15-dimensional time matrix that is the basic primal order of how the universe is structured, which means we have to take on that primal order to incarnate at all into that system, we'll find that there are 5 levels of matter density we pass through. We go from pure consciousness in the form of vibration, which would be inaudible sound. We move into the primal light fields of dimension 15, 14, and 15. And from there, we move into progressive states of density. We move into density 4, which is the pre-matter, the D12 pre-matter liquid light. It's actually dimensions 12, 11, and 10. That's density 4. That's when we begin to make the transition into what appears to be to us, while we're in it, physically manifest form. That is pre-matter. Then we go into etheric matter, coming down into density 3. That would be dimensions 9, 8, 7. Then we come down into density 2, which would be semi-etheric matter. That would be dimensions 6, 5, and 4. And then here we are down here, what's called physical gross matter density, dimensions 3, 2, and 1. All of these dimensional structures are created by variance in particle phasing rhythms, flashing on and off with little scalar waves. Each dimension has a different flash rhythm. And because of that rhythm, it creates separations between energy fields that allows this progression of forming, coming down through the different levels of matter density to where we are here. When we begin to work with Kathara healing, we start to be able to re-expand into those higher levels. We get to the point where we realize we have the ability, it's not going to happen overnight. You have to regenerate it in the DNA template. We have the ability to eventually recapture what we had once. What is the full conscious ability to say, okay, I want to de-manifest right now, and do it. There's no problem. You didn't have to ask some angel on the sky to do it for you. You simply knew how to run your body and your consciousness while you were in form. This is what understanding these core structures of matter will teach you. Change the quickly fire. Okay. Now, universal and planetary catharsis. This is where we start to learn what is that word. What is the Kathara grid that this program is obviously based on? It's a diagram that's used to explain relationships of the core template. It's a diagram many of you might have seen, except it's done a little differently because the ones you've seen have been in twisted text. So we're trying to make sure you didn't have access to the detailed frequency. Now, if we can go, I think I'm going to put that up. Now, let me see. Start getting some visual stimulation up there for you. Okay. Trying to see what pages to figure out. This is really that's awesome. Okay, let's go to page 14. There should be 14. No, 14 on the bottom. Okay, that's 37. Yeah, 14 on the bottom. There you go. Okay. But I was just talking about, when we just took off, put that aside so people put it back on, okay? Thanks. When I was talking about heart attack, and heart attack, this is what I was talking about. It was on page 14 in your books. They explain what they are. You have those basic three units. It starts out as a particle and it polarizes to form the partitron and the particle. Matter, the matter and the antimatter come out of the antimatter. This all gets into particle phasing because it's the rate at which that cycle happens, at which a particle breaks down to form partitron and particle, and then recycles back, turns off, and goes back into the antimatter particle form. So we're taking this down to the microsubatomic particle level. What's happening physically in your being, not just giving you spiritual concepts to understand essentially. We're teaching you right down to the core. From there, these little units of energy build up to form something called kilons, which are groups of particles that take on very specific mathematical relationships to each other and form what look like little crystals. If you could see them, and when you can see them with when you get your higher vision turned on, they look like little tiny crystals of different shapes. Those crystals fill out to form kilon codes, which are more complex groupings of energy units with specific mathematical relationships to each other. And then you start to form grids. You end up with particle grids. We call them particle grids. These were even, the word, I think it was, what was it, in ancient Hindu? You had found this reference.
Pratiki.
Pratiki. They were very close to explaining some of this in the ancient Hindu teachings. But this is the basic substance that you're made out of and that the universe is made out of. Okay, can we put that on one more? No, just stick, when you're done, just stick them under. Yeah, then you can go back to the music and you can. Yeah, that's not the one there. No, the one you had on before. Let me see what page that was. The first page, it was like the
chapter.
Yeah, because I want to describe a little bit more about these things. Okay. Now, so we're going to get into Kathara grids. I'll show you this in a minute. As soon as we have to change the tape in a second. So I won't get that out yet. It's called the 12-tree grid. Kathara 12-tree grid. This is that diagram that has appeared in the Kabbalah in fragmented form that was only considered the higher rabbinai could have any access to this information. Because any of this information was suppressed to all heck for the last 25,000 years on this planet. The people that are taking the roundtables, of course, will find out why. But you don't need to even know why, just to realize for 25,000 years, this information has been purposely and intentionally kept away from us because it empowered us to reestablish our personal connection on Source, to understand our biology, and to set ourselves and our planet free. All right? We have Kathara 12-tree grid inside of our body, but the universe itself is structured on them. So before we learn about the one in our body, in this section, the context of healing, we're going to learn about the ones that runs through the 15-dimensional structure that forms this universe. Because that, on a microcosmic level, is exactly what we have inside. The small things in this universe hold the same core pattern as the whole universe does in itself. The macrocosm and the microcosm are reflections of each other on a core level. All right, so we're going to learn about the Kathara grids and what's called Kathara centers and lines. This gets very interesting because when we learn about them in the body, which is, okay, you want to cut for a second, you've got to change the tape. Now, we're going to get into something called Kathara centers and lines. When we talk about them in, I believe, Chapter 2, which will be, we're going to start that one tomorrow. And in Chapter 2, you'll learn about it in your body, which is actually a little easier. Because when we start, but we're going to start with the universal structure first, so you see where your body fits. We're going to talk about the Kathara centers and lines in the universal structure, in the planet structure. These are the exact same things you have in your body structure. But on a planetary level and on a universal level, the 12 points that we talk about in the 12-tree grid, they form 12 Kathara centers that, on a planetary, galactic, and universal level, are stargates. So we learned that stargates is not just something you see on the Sci-Fi Channel. There are real interrelationships of energy that happen in very key points in the planetary body, in the galactic body, in the universal body, or in the human body. We didn't call them stargates when we talk about them inside the body. We simply call them Kathara centers. And I'll show you where they're located when we get to the body part. So we'll talk about the Kathara centers and lines, which are the lines that connect them. The lines of energy frequency that in the body would connect the Kathara centers in the body, that on the planetary body would connect the stargates, that on the galactic body would connect the planets in that galaxy through the stargates, and the same thing on the universal level. We start to see, when we study Kathara healing, because it's core template healing, we're starting to see a commonality with everything else in the universe, where we fit as an intrinsic part and reflection expression of the whole universe itself. There's a peace that comes with that. At least there was for me when I started to cognate that. You start to realize, wow, it's implied by my existence. It's viewed in my existence that I'm part of the divine scheme. You start to realize nobody can be not part of it. There are no outsiders. We're all a part of the structure. We're all a part of the cosmos. There's a oneness feeling that comes out of that. It allows you to open to a space of greater love for yourself and for other people. So you start to realize everybody counts. We all have the same core. That's what it's about. We have diversification on the outside, and that's good because it makes life interesting. But at the core, we're all composed of the same stuff. The units of the consciousness of God, if you want to look at it that way. And it takes on the same structure before we get into individuated form. We have the same Kathara structure inside of us. Everything from a glowworm to a human being to an ancient race being that was 12 feet tall with huge amounts of information to a planet, to a star, the cosmos has that same structure and is composed of consciousness. You will learn here also that energy is consciousness and consciousness is energy. That means what science identifies as energy is like this stuff, right? It's just energy. They do not assign to it a consciousness attribute in the traditional sciences. This is an erroneous assumption that it is just some kind of dead energy or byproduct of something that can be used to make things happen, as if your consciousness is something separate from that. All energy is consciousness in a way characteristic of the form that it carries. And because all forms have at their core the Kathara template, we all have the same core consciousness. So there's a relationship to the universe that out of understanding the structures here, you will find, and you will be able to begin to embrace and play with within yourself. We'll get into something called scalar shields, crystal seals, and dyadic points. We won't cover them heavily on the planetary level right now. That would be more of an advanced Templar course, which is kind of what we're going to get into after this workshop, when we get into the Roundtables workshop. That will get into the planetary level of Kathara and some important stuff that's happening. But we'll begin to understand just the basic things of what these are. What is a scalar shield? Now, shield is a word to describe a three-dimensional set of scalar wave patterns. Okay, our bodies are built on shields. For each density level, we have a shield. It appears as a disk of scalar wave patterns that have specific flashlight sequences that circulate energy in a very specific way. The shields on a planetary level correspond to the Earth's body in that sense. So the Earth in dimension 1, 2, 3 would have a shield that corresponded to dimension 1, 2, 3. We're going to use the Earth's shield to draw frequency in Kathara healing through something called the Planetary Biofeed Interface System. Big word. What it is the fact that at the template level, your inner template can connect to the planet's inner template to draw frequency from the unified field. Because where does the planet get its energy from? It actually gets the energy in its core template from the unified field of the dimensions around it and from the galactic level and the cosmic level. And when we get all the way back up to, okay, where's the final level? You have the primal sound fields, then you come into the time matrix and you have the primal light fields. These are the creation currents that everything manifests on. You have an ability to tap into those primal creation currents more than the small amounts that run through your body right now by opening the connections between your body's template and the template of the planetary shields. So we learn a little bit about what planetary shields are, so you know when we talk about opening to them, you have an idea of what they are. It's a way of getting access to the natural life force energies, the natural life force currents that come down through the dimensional structure, that are our birthright and our heritage. We're supposed to have these energies. They're supposed to keep us alive. Kathara healing begins the process of reclaiming our ability to run those frequencies. When human form was originally designed, it was actually in immortal form. It was a 12-strand pattern, which meant it could hold 12 dimensions of frequency, 12 dimensions of consciousness. Now, if dimensions 10, 11, and 12 go with the pre-matter liquid light state, that meant the human body could turn itself back into pre-matter liquid light in order to be manifest. A body that can do that can run so much frequency, it does not need to eat. The original human body was barbarian. It didn't need to draw energy from eating things that had energy in them. It simply drew energy from the air, through the planetary grids, to sustain the body. The original human body was immortal. It could last indefinitely. The original human body was much taller. It was about 12 feet tall, sometimes up to 14 feet tall. These are things that we're not going to reclaim overnight. We're functioning on anywhere between a 3 to 3.5 DNA strand activation level now. Those attributes go to the 12-strand activation level, but these are our potentials. Those potentials are made possible because of the planetary shields as being a natural part of what the planet's made out of. If your planet has a template, its shield is blocked, certain parts are damaged, or it can't pull from the galactic energy or from the universal energy, that's going to imply any life form on the planet is going to have that blockage within its own grids because you're a part of the planet, because you're connected to it. If the planet can't pull a frequency, you can't either. What has happened for the last 25,500 years on this planet is some very precious frequencies were not able to be accessed here. And our bodies have deteriorated horribly. Our race is degenerating itself to death. We die now, which didn't happen. 25,000 years ago it did. The big adjustment where we started to die instead of to be immortal and just transmute happened about 210,000, 216 years ago. This is, again, Templar stuff that we'll talk about in the planetary grids roundtable course. But it's important to understand that if we learn about things like scalar shields on the planetary level, this isn't something that just little fluff knows that you don't need to know anything about. It's key to understanding how your body is working or isn't working. It's key to understand what has taken place here on this planet that gets us to the point where we are the way we are. Right now, it's probably good that we don't remember our other simultaneous selves in these other time vectors, right? And we talk about simultaneous time. So the other selves of you that exist in the pre-ancient cultures where you might have been 12 feet tall and you didn't know how to demanifest. It's a good thing you don't remember right now, because if you did, you would feel a pain and a longing so horrid, and almost an indignity, just indignant, because you remembered what your potential is, and when you have, then you realize something could change that and took it away. Right now, our bodies are about 2/3 more dense than they were ever intended to be. There's specific reasons. It's called the checkerboard mutation that we'll get into in the Rainbow Roundtable class. It was done on purpose here. When we begin to understand the scalar shields, things called crystal seals, which are points of frequency that anchor other frequencies in the body. They're part of the anatomy of the planet body and part of your anatomy. Diagonal points are little tiny vortices that feed energy back and forth within your body, within the planetary body, within the galactic body, the universal body. When you start to understand all these things, you start to get a picture of energy interrelationships. And you start to see where you fit. That's why we do context of healing first. Where once you get the context, the bigger picture, then you can see where you, as a smaller unit in that bigger picture, fit. It gives you an advantage in any type of healing modality. But you won't just learn healing with this program. You'll learn an orientation to looking at the relationships of things in the universe in a much broader way than what you're being taught by the traditional paradigms that are out there. We're learning a bit about the universal and internal Templar complexes. Templar is a word that came out of two words. Temple, pillar. Temple was referring to the body. Pillar was referring to the pillar or standing wave of universal life force currents that, when the body is functioning properly, come through the body to continually and perpetually energize it. The planet has a Templar. That's the energy system that progressively and continually process energy through the Stargate system, which is the planetary grid. The galaxy has one, the universe has one, the time matrix that we're in has one. We have one, Templar complex. So when I use the word Templar, I'm referring to those core energy systems that the body and matter space runs on down here. We get the word Templar a lot of times, if at all, in association with a group called the Knights Templar, which was an ancient order that today kind of expressed themselves as the Freemasons, that were on a conquest to get control over this Templar. They knew about the Stargates and they were trying to get control of them to make sure they could use them in a way that wasn't really a part of the divine plan that was here. So when I use the word Templar, I'm going far beyond any association with the particular Knights Templar group. They're considered an Illuminati group, which means a group that has been trying to work, a small group of elite people trying to control and exploit the masters in order to have more power for themselves. There's a lot of them out there, so it's not just them. But I didn't want you to be confused about the word Templar and how it's being used. They took that word in the ancient times, Templar. That was their conquest. They were going to try to take control over its Templar, its Stargate system. So the universe had the word Templar first. Or the ancient ones, the ancient races that were 12 feet tall that knew all this knowledge. That was their word. And it was hijacked to have a negative association. I don't want you to think that this word is coming from anything to do with the Knights Templar, because it is not. Now, we'll get into those, and we'll get into the transduction sequence and how that creates holographic reality. Holographic reality construction. Now, a hologram is basically structured. The transduction sequence is the sequence by which energy, there's one chart in here that we'll look at, to show you just how energy passes from the state of units of consciousness, part A, part B, part ground, down through this series of forms and interrelationships, mathematical, geometrical interrelationships, into what eventually becomes physical matter. Once you understand this context, then you're ready to start finding out about your body parts and how they connect to it. Because this is what gets exciting. We start to realize you have an internal Templar complex. There are points right on your body that you can learn to do things with that will help to increase the life force currents you can bring into your body. They will help you to heal. They will help you to activate dormant DNA, which will help you to bring in higher levels of consciousness that you're told in this society you don't have. There are so many things that you can learn to do with this information. And you have a part of yourself already that knows how to. If you can imagine yourself as a being that's really made of 12 dimensions, huge consciousness, you're Christ being, right? You have that Christos, pre-matter, 12 dimensions of consciousness and knowledge. You can have that implied by your existence. However, you came into a tiny little package that shut out all the 3 dimensions of your awareness of yourself. When you begin to work with the Kathara grid to heal, bioregenesis, to regenerate the original template so you can bring the rest of you in, the potentials are endless. It's exciting. And that's why I like to share this information with people, because there's an excitement about it. There's a part of each of us that is grand and great and wonderful that doesn't need an ego to try to make it feel better. And the only reason people get egotistical and arrogant is because at the core they feel so darn useless and pathetic. That's where egotism comes from. A race that feels it has no purpose, was created for nothing, evolved out of animals, and once it's dead, it's gone. What kind of purpose, what kind of feeling of significance is that race going to have? It needs to develop an ego, there's one, to make itself feel like it's worth breathing when it gets up in the morning. There's a whole paradigm that has nothing to do with the way reality is. The fact that you exist implies that you have purpose and meaning. You were, you existed before, you entered the manifest form, and you will continue to exist after. Once you realize these things, and you realize there are keys to the kingdom, your inner kingdom, and that is the kingdoms of heaven that have been talked about in the Bible, and those kind of things they're talking about. The higher density universes that were composed of higher frequency dimensions. They put it in very kind of flowery and vague terms to keep people kind of wondering about, is it real, what is it? These things are potentials that belong to each one of us. They're our heritage. We can get them back when we start knowing the keys to the kingdom. The keys of knowing how energy works and how to use our body parts. If we don't know we have a Kathara grid, that there's a couple distortions in it. Those distortions are keeping us locked in the three-dimensional perception. If we don't know that, we're never going to look for that distortion and fix it, are we? We're going to just accept the fact that we're a limited race that has no purpose, that's living in a three-dimensional world, and once we die, we're gone. It's our choice, what we want to believe. I always, when I'm confronted with, well, that could be true, or that could be true, I kind of look at it, no, what if I believe this? Follow that in. If that were true, what outcome would this give me? And then I look at the other one. Okay, let's say that were true. What outcome would this give me? If you look at the traditional paradigms that are being taught here, that don't teach you these things, that just teach you you're a lowly life form, and you look at the potentials of what we're trying to teach you here, about the stuff you already have, you just forgot as part of you. Look at the potentials of how you could change. Your world could change. Your power, your ability to hold power and knowledge would change, which means your ability to interact with the world and create what you want in the world would change. Healing is not just the body. Healing is of the mind and it's of the soul, where we reclaim our ability to have our power and to use it well in loving and kind ways. But to where all of a sudden there's a lot more to life than death and taxes, where you find that there are ways, there are things that you can create in your life in a way that you like much more powerful than you could ever do before, because you're not limited like you were. Quite like you were by money, by a system, whatever system it happens to be that you're in. Kathara gives you a framework to understand a long-forgotten characteristic of the human form. And that characteristic is the fact that we were created in the image of God. We were created as manifestors. Our thoughts are things. They are particle units that create scalar wave patterns, that create manifestation templates, just like the ones in our bodies. We learn by understanding these basic structures of dimensionality, not only how to heal ourselves and progressively participate more consciously in healing, but we learn that we have a natural attribute, a gift from Source that we are a part of, a gift of being able to create. It was a gift that we were viewed with because we are part of that collective source that people call that. So there's a huge amount that you can learn from Kathara. You can learn as much or as little as you want to. But that's why I like to give you the manuals too, these things that we don't get to cover. You'll be able to look up and you'll find more. I read the manual sometimes and I say, I forgot that was in there. And I'll discover new things because I tend to highlight the things that, but I want to, what my objective in a workshop like this is to get you familiar with as much as possible that you can use as soon as possible. I don't want to get hung up on small detail when I say, well, that's in the book if you want to learn more about that and make that connection. But here's, he's A, B, C, and D. Here's how they work together. Here's what you can do with them to create an effect. So that's what I try to do. Okay. And, all right, we can move from this one. I'm going to go into the holographic template. We started that. Let's see what page I want to go to. This is really annoying. Anybody have the time? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good. So we'll go to the 5 now. Let you go so you can eat on premises if you want to, so it doesn't take us 3 hours to get everybody back together and see them again. Okay. Okay, on page, is page 17? probably isn't. I think that's no. Okay, let's go to page 18. Yeah, put 18 up, please. Thank you for looking at this. One of the first things, after we learn the fact that the universe is created out of particle, particle, that form kelons, that form kelon folds, that form particle grids, we talked about in another diagram, is the characteristics of the hologram, which are the relationships between those elements, those particle kelons and particle grids. They have characteristics of vibration and oscillation that create some very specific things in relation to matter and matter density. Now, when we talk about cosmic structure, the higher dimensional fields, which are 8 through 15, are actually, as you go higher, you go into this range. You move from what this is into that range. But the higher dimensional fields, they have a lower vibration, higher oscillation, they're expanding, they're higher frequency, waveform. Okay? It's a shorter wavelength that those frequencies are made out of. That would put it into the, as far as color spectrum goes, it would put it into the cool color spectrums, shorter wavelength. A slower electron spin around the nucleus has less density, is more electric. And this gives you the progression here. You can look at these on page 18 if you want to in your books. This is what we're aiming for. This is what we used to be able to do. We could go from a dense state, do this to ourselves, and end up demanifest. When you can demanifest, it's kind of neat, because if you have a whole civilization of people that can demanifest and reappear with, they don't need houses. You don't need a house if you're going to have body equipment in it, right? You can choose where to pop up and where to leave. You know, you go busically transit. It's a whole different world when you're in that kind of world, just so you know. This isn't going to happen overnight just because you took the car, you know. But realizing that there were worlds structured on this is an accomplishment all into itself. The ancients that are still back there, they're trying vectors like you, these times simultaneous, right? They live this way. They can pop up here if they want to, because they shift their angular rotational particle spin to be characteristic to the particle spin of this time factor. And they can appear here. That's how we have the Kathara manual of these transmissions that we're given. The Kathara manual comes out of something called the CDD plates, cloister Dora plates. The cloister races were the races I'm referring to. Dora is the word they use for soul, and Tura is the word they use for oversoul. The cloister Dora plates were holographic discs, recording discs from the ancient times. They were given to us here in 246,000 BC. And they are massive recording storage data units. And they still have them. The cloister races still have them. From their time periods, they visit here periodically. They like to come up through Kauai, Hawaii. There's some bases and things around there that they visit through. But they can come up through other areas. And they're in contact with some people. The information in this book and all of the information on history and things that comes through some of the other books that we have out has come from these plate records. I held these things in my hand. They're pre-Atlantean technology. Atlantis was relatively new compared to these. And they also have other properties about them. They work with the stargates, they don't just record data, they're also transmitters. So the information here comes from the cloister Dora plates. These are the ancient sciences that when people used to know how to build spaceships and go through portals and do all sorts of sci-fi type things, and that was common knowledge on this planet. This is the knowledge that's stored in these plates, and this is the beginning of that knowledge being given back to us. Who's giving it back to us? We're giving it back to ourselves. The parts of ourselves that are in those other time vectors right now that realize that this part of themselves up here got trapped in time because of genetic mutation. They're reaching from their time frame up to this time frame to give us the information to set ourselves free. Because if they are trapped, we are trapped, so are they. So it's a healing. It's called the trans-time healing that's taking place there. Kathara is the key to that kingdom. I've seen people that didn't understand much about Kathara. They saw a flyer and say, "Oh, well, I do Reiki, I know better." Reiki has its purpose. If you use it with Kathara, it's about 100 times more effective than it is by itself. But when I try to get across to people, this is the core template stuff, underneath all the other surface stuff. You can start with your physical body, the allopathic medicine, and go down through the chakra system, through chakra healing, do exotonal line healing, all that stuff. You're still going down toward the template. If you want to make lasting change and fix things permanently, you need to fix it from the causal level. Where did this disease coming from in the first place? That is the core template. That's what our healing is about. You can apply this to any other healing modality, and it will amplify the positive effects of whatever other healing modality you're using. So we're not anti-Reiki or anything. We simply say use it with this, and it will tremendously increase anything you're doing with it. Now this is interesting when we look at the differences here, because this is very controversial compared to regular science out there. It's like, well, vibration oscillation is supposed to the same thing. No, it isn't. This shows you right down to what it does to faster electron spin around the nucleus would be the lower, denser form, right? You take that over here, you got slower electron spin around the nucleus. Okay, this takes it right into the atomic structure and what's happening with vibration and oscillation. When you are working with Kathara healing, what you will progressively do is raise the frequency of the body. Which if you look at that chart, if you have higher frequency, raise the frequency, that means you're doing that stuff over on that side, right? That means you are de-densifying the body. You are lowering its vibration. You are raising its oscillation. You are expanding rather than contracting it. You are making it go into its form. Will be composed of its little scalar waves. Remember those scalar standing waves? They'll be shorter and shorter and shorter. The wavelength will be shorter. So you're making physical changes in your core template when you work with Kathara. Let's see, we can go on to the next one, I think, which is okay. We go to page 22, please. That should be the big brown or oval shaped one. Now, I talked about 15-dimensional time matrix. Now, here's a diagram that will show you the basic spatial relationships of this. Now, this isn't, you're not going to like drive a spaceship out into the universe and find us floating in the sky. And this is your core template. It doesn't work that way. Okay. What this diagram does is shows you the relationships between dimensional structure. So you can begin to have an operating ability to interact with those dimensions in specific ways, because there are specific relationships between them. Now, we're actually in this. This is why we won't go up there and find it hanging in space. We exist within it. If we look here, we have, first of all, this outer ring all the way around. These are 3 levels of the non-dimensionalized energy matrix within which the time matrix resides. Now, 2 new words, time matrix and energy matrix. Time matrix is the dimensionalized structure. It has dimensions 1 through 15. That is the space or the frequencies within which manifestation can take place. All right. Beyond that are non-manifest fields of simple vibration of energy and consciousness. Those fields are called the energy matrix. They do not have dimensionalization. They are not structured in the same way as dimensions are structured. They exist as primal sound fields. That's what is known as the primal sound fields. Now, in some biblical translations, they say, in the beginning was the word, the sound, the vibration. They were trying to explain in very simple terms how one comes from being a part of Source, or God, into externalized expression. But it's funny, because you're not really like God's here and you looked over there. It doesn't work that way. That's not how we come into being. If you look at God as the totality and unquantifiable force of consciousness within which all things exist, you would have God, right? As the big thing with no boundaries, grab that. Then you would have 6 of these. 4 primal light, primal sound, vibration fields. The next level would be up here. Dimensions 15, 14, and 13. They represent the primal light fields. They're called the Ki-Rashe. The primal light fields, we go from source into first stage of manifestation, which would be primal sound, into primal light. From there, now that's just a waveform, it would be a gaseous light substance. We move into density from there. We come into dimensions 12, 11, and 10. Now this is area that's known as the Christos field. It's the pre-matter, hydroplasmic liquid light field that is the first stage of consciousness as gaseous form, coming into a form that can hold density. And that first form is common to every one of us, and it's pre-matter. And that looks like, if we were to see it, pale-filled with liquid light. That's what it looks like if we were to see it. And we can see it when we use the high vision. It's called hydroplasm. That's one of the ancient words for, well, the translation of the ancient language into a word that has anything to do with the way we use language here. It would be considered hydroplasmic. Now, the primal light fields are considered thermoplasmic. Thermo, related to heat. Okay? So hydro, related to water. These are telling you something about the density levels of those fields. Now, this is the whole structure. We live within this structure, and so does everything else in the universe. All our space up there that scientists see when they look at the telescopes and send their little Voyagers out to see what's up there. They're all taking place within this structure. They're not going to find it floating. Now, if we come into the Christos level, or the pre-matter liquid light level, this is where we begin to take on differentiation of form. This is where different galaxies become different from each other, where different species become different from each other. And that difference comes in a very interesting way. We always have the same Kathara or template, 12 primary points of frequency that correspond to the 12 dimensions of manifest matter. We all have that core. But from there, those things we talked about before, Poincare units and kilons, they start to take on different mathematical relationships built on that core. That's where we get individuation, and we get differentiation between species and manifest forms, or we'd always be the same form. Right. That only happens as we move our consciousness from source down through these fields into here. Now we get into dimensions 9, 8, and 7. This field here represents the etheric matter density. That's etheric matter is like, you know how you see ghost movies on TV? And ghosts are like these two-dimensional images that they look like the person, but you can put your hand through them. That's what etheric matter density would look like if you were to see it. And some ranges of it are completely out of our range of perception right now, because our DNA isn't working as fast as it should, so our